Okay, welcome. This is the Jordan School District Board of Education study session. Today is Tuesday, January 11th, 2022. And welcome back to a new year. We recognize that this last week has been stressful for many. A lot of illness going around for sure, and that also includes the board. We'd like to excuse Ms. Atwood tonight, and Mr. Robinson is joining us electronically. Here in person we have Ms. George, Ms. Richards, myself, Ms. Miller, Mr. Dunford, and Mr. Young is on his way. We just want to say thank you to all of our amazing employees for all you are doing for our kids. We know this is a difficult, challenging time, and we just want you to know that we are very mindful of that and very grateful for everybody. We are going to start out tonight with a discussion on the feasibility of pocket busing in Harriman. This is a continuation of a discussion that we started a couple of weeks ago. So we'll turn the time over first to Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Ms. Miller. Great to be here with you. Happy New Year, everybody. As you indicated, we are here to talk about the feasibility of pocket busing in Harriman. It's a continuation of a discussion we've had. We also have some updates that were related in the same conversation in the last board meeting regarding growth in West Jordan. And we have that to go at the end of this presentation. To begin with, I just want to acknowledge the fantastic work of our student services team. This presentation and the numbers we're sharing with you today are hot off the presses. We've been working with Harriman City even today, just hours ago, working with them on getting updated information and projections for some of the building sites and the areas of growth that we have in Harriman. So the information you're going to be getting is as new and as current as it can be. To begin with, I just want to lay a context. Can we get the, are we working on it? Okay. We'll pull the map up in just a minute. We did have it working earlier. It's HDMI. There we go. Okay. So this is, to just put it in context of the areas that we're going to be discussing. In the middle, you'll find Ridgeview, and we have included all school boundaries that touch the boundary of Ridgeview Elementary, as well as the rest of the Harriman City area elementary schools. So we're only talking elementary schools here, and they either touch Ridgeview or they're part of Harriman City. And the numbers we're going to be sharing with you are part of this boundary area. If you have any questions, please interrupt us at any time. We'll talk and happy to take and field any questions. This next set of numbers are the Harriman area projections. This is based on a request that the board made to show and demonstrate the enrollment projections over the next 5 years. This is actually 6 years worth of new projections. And of those schools that we just mentioned that are on the map. And so there's the total enrollment of those schools on the map and their current use capacity and their upper base range capacity, which is, as you recall from previous discussions, a school with either up to 6 portables or however many portables they currently have beyond 6, if that makes sense. So we have the capacity without a new school in the Harriman area. And if we were to add a new school in the area, we added 925 based on an assumption that the current standard plan is around a 925 student school. So that's where we are in terms of capacity. You can see by the year 2027, it's anticipated our projections show 11,754 students. Our current use in the Harriman area is 12,000. And I want to just take note that this is, although that may seem like, oh, we have enough seats forever, it's not that simple, because we have schools with well over 6 portables, well over 10 portables in some cases. And in order to totally balance that out, that would take a monumental restructuring and shifting of students. But that was a request of the board to want to know the current use capacity and the projected number for the next 6 years. And as I mentioned, these numbers are based on on data and updates that we received even today in talking with Harriman City just hours ago. So when we look at pocket busing options for Ridgeview Elementary that was discussed last board meeting, we looked at 4 main areas. The first area that we looked at is just south of the Mountain Ridge High School. We call it the Mountain Ridge Development. Currently, there aren't many students living there. By the year 2024, there will only be 87 students based on current projections, current yield rates. 87 students is what we project to be there by 2024. I want to put that in context of how many students we will need to move from Ridgeview Elementary in order to accommodate its high growth. We need to move approximately 300 to 400 students elsewhere in the coming years in order to accommodate growth. As we've mentioned previously, Ridgeview can get by next school year without any boundary changes. We'll be adding some portables, but we can get through the next next school year rather. This is all talking about beyond that. Okay. Any questions thus far? Okay, so that area just south of Mountain Ridge High School, 87 students in 2 years, 157 students in 5 years. The next area we're going to be talking about, and we'll have maps to show and demonstrate, Scott Feston will walk through each one of these, is the Juniper Crest area. This is the area, if you know, where Providence Hall is up there, the charter school up there. It's the area to the west of Mountain View Corridor. There are 180 current elementary age students in that area. These students all ride a bus already to Ridgeview Elementary. So that is one of the options that could be on the table for looking at relocating or pocket busing. And we have potential options that we can run by you later on in the presentation. The next group of students we have are in the area that is just south of Real Academy. There we have, it's kind of on the border of walking eligible and bus eligible in that neighborhood. Currently, there are 168 bused students that live in that area. They're currently bused to Ridgeview Elementary. The fourth area in which we've been looking at and considering for potential options is in the area of the Hidden Pines. Hidden Pines you'll find to the south and east of South Hills Elementary or South Hills Middle School. South and east. There's a new development there. Used to be a large estate. They sold some of it and are currently building there. And it's called the Hidden Pines area. We currently bus 34 students to Ridgeview Elementary. That could be another potential area. So, in summary, we need to be able to move between 300 to 400 students in coming years from Ridgeview to allow for capacity. Scott Feston, our expert demographer, is here to take each of these areas, show you on the map, and dissect each area with their growth and other logistics.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Anderson. You have seen these maps. These are maps that we brought last month. But just as to orient you on this map, right here in the middle is Mountain Ridge High School and Ridgeview Elementary School. This large blue area is the proposed Salt Lake Community College campus. Real Academy is down here in the southeast corner of the boundary. So we'll go through each of those areas that Mr. Anderson was talking about, starting with the Mountain Ridge area. This area north of the high school is currently, it straddles the line between Harriman and Riverton. The Harriman portion is currently under construction, and what you see there has all been built within the last year. So the developer is moving very, very quickly on these. They are going to start with construction of some townhouses on just adjacent to the high school, just on the north side of the high school, on the west side of the road. The Riverton portion, north of 138th South, is the portion just adjacent to Mountain View Corridor, the condominium development. That is slated to begin construction as soon as the weather is conducive to construction. So they're going to be kicking off with their multifamily properties in there in the spring. But with the current yield rates and the housing mix, we're not showing a excessive number of students, 157 by 2027, but ramping up fairly slowly. And that is in all of that area in Riverton, so north of 138th South. The Juniper Crest area, as Mr. Anderson said, is above Mountain View Corridor. These students are already riding a bus across Mountain View Corridor to the elementary school. This area is mostly built out. There is some mixed use and multifamily development still to go immediately adjacent to Mountain View Corridor, but those type of housing products typically don't yield a lot of students. So this area for school purposes is pretty much built out. There's 182 current students up there. These are large homes that typically don't yield a lot of additional elementary school students. We see older families with maybe secondary students in them. And they already, like I said, they do ride the bus as well. The Hidden Pines area around South Hills Middle School is isolated from Ridgeview. There isn't a direct connection to the Ridgeview Elementary, so they have to go up and around on 134th South. According to both Riverton and Harriman, the connection of 138th South across the canal is imminent, and they will be constructing that shortly, which would help with transportation in this area. But those students, there's 34 in there. They are bused to Ridgeview, and they could be bused as well to Bluffdale. They would be bus eligible to Bluffdale Elementary as well. The fourth area is this area south of the Real Academy, near the Soleil Apartments. The walk boundary does kind of meander through this neighborhood, but the students who live on the east side of the main road there, they are all bused to Ridgeview Elementary, and there's 168 students in there. There's a lot of kids packed into that little area. Also, the townhouses just immediately south of the Soleil Apartments are in the bus boundary, and the students in those townhouses are included in that 168 count.
Okay. Thank you. So in previous discussions also, we had discussed ideal scenarios versus realistic scenarios, and these are this is a summary of potential options. I want to stress potential to deal with and maybe mitigate the 300 to 400 students that we need to address and provide education to in Ridgeview right now that we just won't have room for in coming years. So these are options. These are potential options that are feasible. You could, in looking at the numbers of students just north of Mountain Ridge and Ridgeview Elementaries, there are only 87 students there. Given that it would require them to be, if we pocket bus them elsewhere, it would take them away from a walk area to another school, and thus requiring at least 1 to 2 more routes of buses, bus drivers, etc. It's a potential option. We could still look at moving them, but we wanted to make sure that everybody understood the ramifications for that. We could also bus Juniper Crest students to Harriman Elementary School, which has room and will have room after the new school opens up. There are 2 buses that currently serve the 182 students in this area. Okay, Hidden Pines is the other area. There's 1 bus that serves those 34 students in the area. Those students are also bus eligible for Bluffdale Elementary, which would have room potentially for those 34 students. And then the area to the south of Real Academy, where the new could be moved to the new Harriman Elementary School. It could be moved to Harriman Elementary School as well. There are 2 buses that serve those 168 students in the area. So that's a summary of the potential options. If we were to do those, any combination of those or all of those, that we have just summarized, this is what the projections would be for those new schools. And this includes Bluffdale it includes the DLI students in that area that are from out of boundary. This also includes the new Harriman Elementary School that's going to be opened up. This is based on revised data that we received today from Harriman City on the Olympia Hills development area. And Harriman Elementary includes the 110 DLI students we have there as well. So Ridgeview Elementary, if we made all of those changes, next year would go from where they currently are to 803 and cap out at around 1168 in 6 years. The new Harriman Elementary School would be, starting off a little slower, but rapidly increasing, and the trajectory for that school continues after that. Yep. We're open to field any questions, and just leave it with the board now for some discussion.
So if the 168 from Real Academy, instead of going to the new Harriman Elementary School, went to Harriman Elementary, there'd still be room at Harriman Elementary for them?
Yeah, those are options either way. We presented them with the new Harriman Elementary because of the low growth at the beginning. There would be room with potential portables at Harriman Elementary.
It would be close.
Yeah.
It would be tight.
Yeah, we would maybe have to look at portables there.
Or either makes new Harriman tight in a few years, or it makes Harriman tight in a few years.
It makes New Harriman tight in the future. It makes Harriman tight immediately. These numbers are assuming that those 168 go to the new Harriman.
This would involve a boundary change for everybody. These aren't undeveloped areas.
Correct.
That's correct.
Yep.
So if we were to, that's a good question about potential notifications. These are the schools, even though we talked about the entire area. These are the schools under the previous slide. These are the schools that we would want to notify. The cities involved would be Bluffdale, Riverton, and Harriman. Daryl's trying to talk and nobody can hear him.
Like Daryl's trying to talk.
All right, Daryl, are you there?
Board members have a comment while we're waiting to get that microphone working?
Yeah, apparently they can hear him in the Google Hangouts, but not anywhere else. Do you want me to read the question that he's posted in the chat? Mr. Robinson is asking via the chat, would the kids that are by South Hills Middle School that are being bused to Ridgeview still have a bus when 138 goes through? It's a good question. They would likely, what did we decide on that? Not have a bus if 138 went through, because that would really shorten the route and they would be walk eligible at that point.
Yeah.
To Ridgeview, they would still be bus eligible to Bluffdale.
Map is that?
Can you go back up, Scott,
Yep.
and just show them where that 138 South intersection
So,
would be?
so this connection right here is 138th. Right now it dead ends at the canal. Riverton and Harriman would build a bridge and connect, continue that 138th all the way over to Mountain View corridor. But the effect would be that these students in here would then have a direct walking route to the Ridgeview Elementary School. They would no longer need to go up to 134th and around.
When's that supposed to happen?
From what they've told me, when Riverton starts to build their stuff in the spring, it's part of building that road.
The term they've used is imminent, but that's when we think it might get.
Means different things to different people.
Yeah.
So let me make sure I understand what the 34 students that you're talking about there, because I know that area very differently. So everything that's not in yellow is I consider to be Deer Mountain Estates, and that the area in yellow is just the Hidden Pines. So when you say 34 students are in the Hidden Pines area, is that the entire Deer Mountain and Hidden Pines combined?
Yes, it's everything north of 138th South and east of the Welby Jacobs Canal.
And the proposal is to move all of those people,
All of those homes to Bluffdale.
including the Deer Mountain Estates
Yes.
section.
Yes.
What's that?
Just even though they could walk to their local elementary.
Eventually they could walk to-
Eventually.
yeah.
So here's a little bit of the context for that area. And because right now, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, that whole section goes to South Hills, is boundaried for South Hills Middle School,
Yes.
and then is boundaried for Mountain Ridge High School. And that section, putting that section in Ridgeview originally, had more to do with the fact that South Hills Elementary, or South Hills Middle School, is in their backyard. And if they continue to attend, and in that spirit of trying to keep the feeder system contiguous, because if they went to Bluffdale Elementary, they then would have gone all the way to Hidden Valley Middle School, which would have then taken them to Riverton High School. And so that one section, in the spirit of it made more sense for them to attend South Hills Middle School, we lined them up with that elementary school, with the Ridgeview Elementary, so that that feeder stayed consistent. Now I know we don't always have the luxury of keeping that feeder consistent, but that's why we moved them out of Bluffdale Elementary in the first place. That community was thrilled with Bluffdale Elementary. It worked for them. We moved them because of that. So the question that I have is, if we were to move that section to Bluffdale Elementary, are we leaving their middle schoolers at South Hills and consequently their high schoolers at Mountain Ridge, or are we moving them completely out of the one feeder into the other?
For the purposes of this discussion, we did not take into account any other boundary changes other than elementary school. And these are potential options. We were asked to bring feasible options back. As you can see, Mr. Young, moving them to Bluffdale would have space. Mr. Robinson asked another question in the chat room that is related to this. He says, will the move of Hidden Pines be a permanent move, or will Bluffdale need space? In the projections, Bluffdale would be fine with them long term. As you know, there's only 34 in there, so Ridgeview, even after 6 years, would top out with at just over 1,200 students if we kept the Hidden Pines in there. So we're not weighing in on what preference we have. We're just showing all of the the feasible options that are on the table for this.
I guess what I'm saying is, from my perspective, I don't think 34 students moves the needle dramatically enough, and given, I don't think any of the other options disrupt, well, maybe they do disrupt other feeder systems, but I would like us to address, if we're going to move them to Bluffdale Elementary, what are we gonna do with them throughout the rest of the feeder system?
That's a really good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
To your
Because
question,
it's hard too if there's only a few students in your 6th grade class going to one middle school and everyone's going to another one. That makes for a rough transition.
Mr. Young, to your previous question about these other students, let's see, the students that are currently going to, if we move them to Harriman Elementary School, you would have some Harriman Elementary students going to Fort Harriman. You'd probably have some also going elsewhere, but they end up feeding into the same high school in that area. Yeah, it actually might get split between Mountain Ridge and Harriman, so you'd have a mix probably with Harriman Elementary. So
And
you
I
could,
think that needs to be part of our discussion, is are we going to fix it all the way up through, or are we just looking to fix the elementary piece of this for each of those areas?
and Mr. Robinson points out in the chat that we have other schools that are split into 3 different feeder systems, such as Midas Creek.
I do think we should bear it in mind, though. If we can avoid splitting into multiples, that would be ideal. We can't avoid it a lot.
If I'm reading the numbers correctly, leaving them at Ridgeview wouldn't change things dramatically, just a classroom or, worth of students. And I'm looking at the numbers for Ridgeview, and by 2024, we're already, needing something there. They're over regular capacity, and they would be with the 34 added on. But what I'm trying to say is, we're really not getting that much wiggle room just by that change, if that makes sense.
Again, there's just feasible options. We're not at this point weren't putting them into the mode of boundary options or anything like that.
So is the question, do we want to move forward with the boundary change process?
I think, and again, I want to point at the timeline. Ridgeview is okay for next school year. If we move forward with the boundary option, we have time. We need to give 120 days notice by law before we make any boundary change. So it's just something for the board to bear in mind and give us, as staff direction as to what timeline you'd like to approach that with. We can do it sooner. We can do it later on next school year. But in time for, and to notify anybody by this time next year, I would think would be important.
So help me understand the 120-day law requirement. The 121 days is from notice to board approval, or
Yes.
from notice to effective date?
Board approval. So it's approximately 4 months of.
So we would need a change in the opening of fall 2023.
Yep.
And we typically approve those spring-ish
Mhm.
of 2023. So we would 120 days prior to, so we're talking late 2022 is when the notice would need to be given.
If we followed the same, if we just fast forwarded the year and we use the same timeline as we have before, where we wanted to have boundary changes wrapped up by, say, around Thanksgiving, we notice in the summer, that gives 4 months between July and November to go through the process. The board has even considered preliminary approvals and then have the official approval after that. It just needs to be 120 days to official board approval for the boundary change.
So President, I would suggest that given the fact that we wouldn't do anything until summer, the question for the board is there another alternative you want to consider, or is this the best we can do, and we just wait until summer to move forward with the boundary change?
Yes, that is a good question. Sorry, just dropped.
When we were asked for realistic versus ideal, another option out there that may be more ideal, but we don't have a lot of control over in terms of infrastructure and other things, is to build another school in some of the properties we have. But again, those are things that may be beyond our control with infrastructure, roads, grading, access, things like that.
Anyone else have any other options they want explored?
I'm not thrilled with this, but I just don't know what other option we have.
Yeah, I'm the same way. We need to build a new school in the area.
Mr. Robinson,
That's a problem.
he added into the chat, he's proposing, I think we should study in facilities committee.
Which we plan to, and that would be great, but I just need to know if the board, if this is the best we can do, if there's no better ideas than the ones that have been presented, then facilities would like to tackle this and just chew on this a little bit and make a recommendation to the board. But I just find myself saying, there really isn't something else. Is there anything else we could do? And I'd love the board to look at, I don't know. If the conclusion is there's nothing else we can do, this is the best we can do because we can't build anywhere close enough to these properties to be reasonable, then I think tonight's discussion is over and facilities would like to chew on this for a little bit.
And I think is that what Daryl's asking for is facilities chew on it, see if you can come up with any other solutions. If not, this is our best option.
Mr. Dunford, at this point, I do recall you bringing up the idea of a no-boundary elementary school.
Yep.
That should still be in the conversation, I would think, especially as I look again at these numbers. We've only got 2 years and we're already in trouble again. So, it's either going to have to be a new school somewhere or potentially an innovative option like you suggested.
Mr. Robinson also said moving boundaries might depend on and if we build other schools.
And that's the plan, is we do have a school that's going to alleviate this area, but we can't build on it for 5 years. So do we just temporarily for 5 years until we can, or is there even pocket busing? We're splitting up this school's boundaries 3 ways, and we're putting a burden on 2 other schools. A burden they can carry, yes, but no.
Did you have something to add, Dr. Godfrey?
And pocket busing requires a resource that is in
Short supply.
supply.
Let's have
I don't think we.
facilities committee talk about it in an upcoming meeting and
I don't
see if
think
there
we
are
can
any
go
other
any further.
possibilities.
Yeah, I don't think we can go any further tonight with this.
we'll chew on it and talk about it.
These were the options we felt were most feasible. When we looked at other options and thought outside the box, it also amplifies busing needs. It creates, problems where we don't have problems currently, where we don't have resources either. So,
However, a lot of these students that you included are already bused. So,
right, yeah, these are options that, with the exception of the pocket bus option just to the north of the school, everybody else is already using buses. Those are, so to speak, sunk costs where we're already implementing bus routes. So the new bus route would be in the growth area to the north of the school. And that's why ultimately we didn't recommend doing that, because they are walk eligible. They live within a few 100 feet of the school, and bus resources are already pretty tapped.
Would the board have an appetite to use our middle school property and put a second an elementary school there? And so,
Then right across the street from each other?
right across the street from each other.
Ish.
I mean, my proposal was to have a boundaryless school far away.
That sounds poetic.
I mean, if we're looking outside the box,
If you had, I'm just going to throw this out there, if I may. If you have two elementary schools really close to each other, you could have one be lower grades and one be upper grades
Right.
for a broader boundary.
I think that's worth exploring.
does our partnership with Real open up any doors for us as an elementary option? Marilyn, as having served on their board, is there anything in our partnership with Real that might pose a solution here?
well, other than the fact that they've already increased their enrollment cap, I think they're using every available classroom. And so I don't know.
Could they expand their building?
They've already done some classrooms within the space that they already have, and I don't know that they have much more. I was wondering about Salt Lake Community College. When are they starting, or is there any possibility there for a little bit of space? Real, I think they're using everything.
Okay, facilities, are you okay if we kind of take this for a while and, Nikki? Matt?
Yep.
This is a big chew on, but I think we've heard from the board as much as a board could make a decision tonight, and we'd like to maybe take this and see what we would recommend to the board.
I think that is a good plan. I think this is a good option. It meets the needs, doesn't add additional busing.
I'd question the word good. I think it's an option.
Yeah, you're right.
It's an option.
I actually agree with you on that.
It's doable.
That's the better word. It is a doable option.
All right.
But I think that'd be great to have facilities committee
All right.
consider
Thank
it
you.
more. And then we'll have this, we'll want this back on the agenda, at least probably by June.
Got to make a decision by summer.
So that we can, if we're doing the boundary change, we'll need to move forward
Right.
with notification by the end of the summer.
Thank you.
Thank
Do
you.
you have what we need, what you think we need, Matt? Nikki, is there anything you think we need that hasn't been given to us yet? Is Scott here?
Scott Thomas?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
okay. I think we have what we need.
I just need 20 hours more of Scott Feston's time.
Yours.
Yeah,
And-
please anticipate a few invitations to Facilities Committee.
Anytime. We also were asked to look at West Jordan. Do we have a couple
Yes.
minutes to
Do we wanna
talk through that?
Yeah. We good?
Okay. So I've been in contact with the West Jordan City Planning Office. The Wood Ranch development was approved in December, so the master development agreement has been approved. It is a big project. Daybreak is or what used to be Daybreak is the developer on it, so that's the type of product you'll see. Their master development agreement allows 3,012 new units in the foothills of the Oakers.
So can you clarify, when you say what used to be, is that Vardy? Is that Larry H. Miller Group? Who are you
They
talking
have changed names. I do not know what they are currently going by, but
Ah,
this
about? But it's not
It's
the
not
Larry H.
Larry
Miller
Miller
it's not
Group.
Larry Miller.
Okay.
This is the
Okay.
one property that they did not include in the sale. So they've got a 20-year build-out plan on that, and water supply is not an issue. So as soon as they are ready, they can start moving earth. That being said, there's a lot of grading, a lot of infrastructure that needs to go in there. We're looking at probably students appearing at Antelope Canyon in the 23-24 school year before we would start to see any students coming out of there. Jones Ranch, which is immediately adjacent to Antelope Canyon Elementary and goes across Bacchus Highway up into the foothills. That's an Ivory Homes project. Currently, they are only entitled to 100 units in there until they can secure some more water. The city has said that the developers are going to construct that water tank for them, but it will still take a year or so before they can, before they're able to do anything beyond those first 100 units, in addition to all of the other infrastructure that they need to put in there. So according to the city, Wood Ranch is now ahead of Jones Ranch as far as when we're going to start seeing development.
What type of units are those 100 units, do you know?
Right now, they're split between townhouse and single family. And they would be immediately adjacent to the school.
Mr. Feston, would you mind just sharing the current yield rates that you calculated for single-family homes versus
Yep.
townhomes versus apartments?
So our yield rates in the Antelope Canyon boundaries, right now the single-family elementary school yield is 0.41. So about every other house yields a student, a little bit more. Townhouses are in the 0.1 range, and apartments are even less than that. The only apartments really in this boundary are in Wood Ranch, and they are not able to be built until they've built 1,000 single-family homes. So we're not going to see the apartments very soon.
So the yield right now is negligible,
Right.
right?
Right.
Okay.
I think
So
for
the
me,
sing-
that was a big takeaway,
Yeah,
is just
yeah.
seeing the yield rates with the number of single-family homes. Maybe not what we anticipated it being at one time.
So is it a 50-50 split there?
In Wood Ranch, it is 50-50.
What about in
Jones
Jones,
is
that 100?
it-
Is that 50-50?
60-40-ish towards single family.
Single family?
Yep.
Thank you.
Once the water is in place for Jones Ranch, how many housetops are we looking at here?
They also they're in the 2,000 range. So,
Have a date yet that they're projected to be built out?
something of that scale, I think they're still looking at probably 15 or 20 years. So it'll take a while. The third area that we looked at is Copper Rim, which is on 7800 South and Mountain View Corridor, just down the hill from Falcon Ridge Elementary School. They have put in almost 100 units there. However, according to the city, they are about out of water, and they will need to secure some more water rights before they can build more. So they're going to be pushing pause here shortly on their new development. So that should give Falcon Ridge a little time to breathe. But of those 87 units that they put in there, I think we're seeing about a half a dozen students is all.
Is that north of the Smiths, the existing
Yes.
Smiths there?
Yep.
West of it.
North and west of it.
North and west, yeah.
Yep. So with these revised development timelines, we've been able to push Antelope Canyon for another year or so before they would start to need some some assistance as well. We do have some property in Jones Ranch, and you know, there are options out there. There's lots of open ground.
Scott, could you update this report for Antelope Canyon and send that to us?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Are you you're not taking them off the watch list though, are you?
Not yet. No,
They're still on the watch list, but less of a priority than they were.
that's right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the West Jordan area? Okay, thank you. Our next agenda item is discussion on challenges or problems board members would like to solve. At the beginning of the new year is a good time to focus in and hear from board members on issues they want us to tackle this year. I have asked Mr. Dunford to lead this discussion.
In our GP 101 policy, it begins with this paragraph: the Board of Education will govern lawfully on behalf of students with an emphasis on strategic leadership. I've thought a lot about that phrase, strategic leadership. And then a little bit later in policy 103, we kind of use that same phrase. The board will govern lawfully on behalf of students with an emphasis on strategic leadership for the future of Jordan School District. And then we add these types of phrases: outward vision rather than internal preoccupation or personal agenda. And then strategic leadership more than administrative detail. Because of the pandemic, which was required, we got so used to looking at our feet and the problems that are right in front of us. And how do we deal with the current crisis, that I wonder if part of our process has taken our eyes off big picture. So this agenda item is to ask each board member, when you look up from the problems we're dealing with at our feet, what do you see? What are the big challenges coming that have to do with strategic leadership, vision, big type of questions that we should be addressing? The reason I ask is I'm going to make a list of these. President Miller's going to make a list of these, and then as we form the agenda, we would like to strategically plan on how to pull these types of issues into our agenda. So would each of you, hopefully each of you have pondered that, come to this meeting saying, as I look up from the problems at my feet, here are the issues I would like to address this year. And I would encourage each of us to form it in kind of a question, the question the board needs to answer, rather than, well, here's a topic I'd like to address. That's fine if that's what you have, but I would love to write on these boards a series of questions you would like the board to answer. And I think we should invite the superintendent, the associate superintendent, and the business administrator to contribute to the questions as well, as this is kind of a sit around this table, big picture. What do you see when you look up? When you look out and see what's coming? So if you're ready to go, I'm going to go to the board and start writing. And then as you guys tell me if you think that's a repeat and we'll combine. But what I'd love to do is just for the next few minutes, this is brainstorming, no criticism at all. No analysis, no yeah buts. Just let's lay them on the board And then we'll go a second pass to say, can we combine? Can we eliminate? If we talked you out of something, does this one seem more descriptive of what you'd like to accomplish? We ready to go? Nikki, you want to start us off?
Well, I wish I had heard your speech before. The agenda item just talked about challenges or problems. And so I don't know if I'm the best person to have start. Mine are at our feet.
We can come back to you. You want to keep going? Daryl, we got you.
Oh, cool. So my big question is, what would we be doing today that we're not doing because of the pandemic? So what would we be doing today as a district that we're not doing because we're looking at our feet? So one of the things that we've had on our list for several years is bullying, especially in middle school. That's the only other inclusiveness. We've also made mental health, wellness, and safety in our schools topics that we were having on our topics at least like monthly, at least quarterly. Those are still there, but they're in a pandemic way. So we also were looking to focus on.
Daryl, are you answering the question from your perspective and you'd like the board to do the same thing? Or are you narrowing your question?
Yeah, I had the main question, what are we doing today that we're not doing because of the pandemic, and then I think I'm making a list under it.
Okay. So if you're okay, I'm going to leave that as the broad question, and then when that question comes up, we can have you add to the narrowed list? Or is there a second one you want me to add to the list?
Have we become reactive instead of proactive?
And by we, who are you referring to?
The board of the district.
Okay, great.
So does bullying need to be up there?
Well, he's made a subcategory. That's what I was asking. As I understand his responses, when that subject comes up, he's got several things he'd like to discuss.
I'll do one.
Marilyn.
I'm hearing a lot from frustrated teachers. And so my question is, what can we do to perhaps lighten their load or take a few things off their plates, combine whatever what can we do?
Great. That's one of mine as well.
One of mine I've got is staffing shortages. I mean, we need a lot more employees, but the solutions to that, I think it can't just be, we need to pay more money so we can get more employees, because there's staffing shortages in every job family in the nation right now. So do we need to restructure things differently? And how, just restructure and how we use staff, or are there changes that we can make? And then also, what else do we need in order to be able to recruit people? So looking at recruitment and retention. But are we really, do we need to change the way we recruit?
So Daryl, I remember when I was at home, it was hard because I couldn't see what was happening on the board. So I just shared a document with you. So check your email and I will copy what he's doing on the board so you can follow along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, I have another one. Special education seems to come up a lot. Issues, and I can't be specific at this point, Ms. George would know better than I, but how can we improve special education?
Mr. Young?
So, I don't want to sound too hyperbolic here. I don't even know if that's a word, but I genuinely, seriously believe what I'm about to say. Perhaps the most meaningful, consequential, and personally impactful decision that this board will make in this year will come this summer when we as a board look at how this district is resourced and makes a determination as to whether we are going to set this district up with the appropriate resources, i.e. dollars, for the next 5 to 10 years, or are we going to put a Band-Aid on some issues? And I think our and that is a decision the 7 of us, and the 7 of us alone, will be making, with a lot of counsel and a lot of guidance from a lot of other people. But that is the most impactful and consequential decision this board, as currently made up, will make, and will have an impact, dare I say, 5 to 10 years down the road. And so, properly understanding where we want to be 4 or 5 years down the road, next year, and what commitment are we going to make to fund that, to me, needs to be something we're talking about just about every board meeting between now and at least June, if not August.
I don't know how to word it. Tell me if this is close.
I'm as blind as a bat, and
What product do we present to the public this summer? And I know that that's not really the word, but what are we? What are we selling? What do we?
and I mean, somehow, how are we going to resource that?
Say, how do we shape our financial future? Is that capturing?
That's better. That's better. Okay, how do we shape our resources? Right. Superintendent, let me do mine. I'm gonna go to the microphone and then I'll write.
I've got one more too.
And then you gotta circle back to Nikki.
Then I gotta come back. I would like to reclaim what is ours, and rightfully ours. There are a lot of hands in the pot. And if we can pull some of them out, I'd like to pull some of them out. I don't know. Legislators, bless their hearts, at every level, think they have the solution to education. And they come along with programs, some of which are less effective than others, many of which are still costing us and our teachers tremendous amounts of time. And I'd like, it's a little bit more than what can we take off their plates. It's who can we get out of the kitchen? Local control of our school district is what I would like to achieve. And how do we do that? That's my question. How do we gain back control of the learning of our own students? That's my question. Tracy? Nikki?
Another one that I had was, let me set it up. About 4 years ago, we made some significant changes to the calendar. We were going from year-round to traditional. A lot of students and teachers used to having the breaks with year-round, and so we looked at how to build those more into our calendar. I think it's time to take a good look at our calendar again and determine if it is optimal for student learning. Are we giving teachers the amount of prep time they need and when they need it, and professional development time, and just to take a look at it. And maybe it doesn't change at all, but I'd like to take a look at it to know, to answer the question is it optimal for student learning?
Great. Nikki?
Honestly, the things that I came prepared to talk about don't apply to this conversation.
Superintendent.
Oh,
Or Marilyn, go. You have another one?
I just have one more, and I'm not quite sure how to put it into a question, but I would really like us to work on differentiating and recognizing our role and the role of our administration. How do we do that?
So can I?
That somewhat dovetail into what you were talking about too,
Yeah.
Bryce?
How do we combine that idea? Because the idea is, I'm going to list it separately, and then as we deal with these, maybe it's the same question. But I'm just going to simply say, is the board doing board work? Or is the board doing district work? Something like that? Are we crossing boundaries?
Yeah, just recognizing and differentiating our role.
Superintendent, I am not putting you in a separate category. I'm just running out of room on the board, so I'm going to switch to this board.
Okay.
You're not being delegated to a different category.
They're both your boards, Bryce. All of mine overlap with things that have already been said,
Great.
I believe. So I'm not offended if you just point to the other board and say, we've got it. One is,
for now, I'd rather put them up and then make sure we don't miss something.
what resources are needed to be the district we aspire to be? And the next question is, where will those come from? How can we staff at needed levels? Now, that to me means, how do we fill the currently open positions, and what additional positions might we need to meet our goals? And of course, which positions are not positions we would continue with, but I don't know of any.
How do I word that?
How do we
effectively?
how do we staff? How do we staff to meet goals? Meet goals and needs.
Good.
And how do we increase health, wellness, and morale? For employees, for every employee and student. And then how do we increase student achievement and opportunities?
Which, I mean, you'd love that to be the focus, but without the first four that you mentioned.
That's right. That's why I built up to it the way I did.
Yeah.
You're exactly right, because if you have employees that where staffing is where it needs to be, and they are, and we're helping them with the things that are concerning them, I mean, this is the most stressful year. That's how you increase student achievement and opportunities, by taking great care of the people who work here.
Associate Superintendent?
The superintendent has emphasized with me and members of cabinet these areas, and I concur with all of them. I may just build on, and it goes along with what other people have said, and I'm not sure how to phrase it properly, but I'm going to just refer to it as giving blank space to employees and students, and by blank space meaning time. I think it's been said that necessity is the mother of all invention. But I think that time is the mother of all innovation, and if we want to have better teachers, students that are willing to take risks, we need to give them slack. We need to give them time to be able to do that. And so it goes along with what has already been said with helping, because I think that will not only help improve instruction, I think it will also help improve our employee wellness and well-being.
Business Administrator, Larson.
Ditto to a lot of things that are up on the board. One of them really just makes me want to tear up, which I'm very grateful for. The thoughts that are coming to my mind is, how do we increase instruction, opportunities for instruction? And then a concern I have about going forward in this new environment is, I'm not sure the worker shortage is going to change. So how do we adapt to this new work environment with work shortages? A lot of what's up on the board right now, which I concur with, but requires more employees, and I'm not sure how to balance that with fewer workers. So more instruction time, and how to adapt for less workers.
Anyone else? That's a pretty meaty list, so maybe
Very meaty.
maybe let's not add to it. Thank you. Executive committee will write these down and start to put them on our agendas. I have what I need. President, do you have what you need? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. I would love to solve all of these this year. No, that's not going to happen. If there's anything that anyone, I mean, some of these are for sure priorities that we'll be jumping on right away. If anyone has some of these that you think need to be priorities, let us know.
On, maybe in reports and comments, can I address one of these that I'd like to see about taking action on maybe very soon? Can we talk about, is that appropriate to
I
talk
think that would
about
be
maybe in
appropriate
that?
there, yes.
Okay,
Yep, good.
thanks.
Okay, anything else to add to that? Thank you. Appreciate that, Bryce. Okay, next up is GP 113, Board Committee Principals, and GP 114, Board Affiliated Committees. Man, I'm not sure I should have taken these policies on. I've got so much red ink on them now that there are clean versions on board docs, though, if that is easier to read. Basically, as I was reading these two policies, the way they read, I really thought 113 was actually talking about our board committees, and 114 was more talking about our representation on other committees. So that's how I've broken them down. 113 is for board advisory committees, and 114 is board representation on district committees or outside organizations. So we start 113 with defining a board advisory committee. It's a committee created by the Board of Education to study issues and make recommendations to the board. Okay, it's our committee, we created it, and it's for our purpose to help us. And then I kept, most of the language the same on that. So feedback on that, and then the big question I have for you at the end, letter F, I list the committees that we have right now. Do we want letter F, or do we take letter F off and just have our policy, and then we get maybe a separate attachment that has actual committees? So I need feedback on that. So starting out just with the definition and the current language that's there, is this okay where we're at, where it's at currently?
What? Where what is what?
So 113 to call it a board advisory committee, and then we've got the same principles that were outlined in policy.
Well, so I'm curious about your insertion of item B. What's your thought process for putting that in there?
It was on GP 114, and 114 included both committees. Both types of committees, but these principles were in this policy. So when I separated it, I just carried that language over from 114.
I think ultimately it's not the board president who's forming the committees, it's the board. And so I think the language needs to be such that the board is ultimately determining who the chair and who the members of that committee are. I don't know if I'm comfortable with the language as it is. I appreciate the phrase collaborate, but I think there needs to be some the president shall collaborate with board members and recommend appointments of the chair and members to the board for final approval. I think I would be more comfortable with that because ultimately we're 7 equals. And I'm uncomfortable with, I would just prefer that we continually acknowledge that concept, that it's ultimately the board that makes these decisions. We really we try to limit what the board president is doing to operation. And so I'm good with the collaboration and recommendations, but I think the board needs to ultimately approve those chairs and committee members.
I think that's a good point. I mean, this language has been in policy for a long time. The reality is, at least the last few years, is that executive committee has these discussions and brings a recommendation to the board. That's been the reality of our practice.
I just think there needs to be specific language that the board itself is the one that's going to approve and make those up. I'm all for suggestions and the collaboration, but I'm not sure I'd like to see that. I think I'd like to see that kind of language in there.
How does everyone else feel about that? And do you want the president shall recommend or the executive committee shall recommend?
Well, ironically, does that create a circular? Because by policy, this one's creating an executive committee, but then I mean, probably.
I'm comfortable with the president,
Let's leave it on this draft, but change the
but I
wording.
do like the boards are put in place by, or committees are put in place by board action. I do like that concept. I do love the addition of E, that a recommendation from the board needs to follow the process of getting it on the agenda.
I'm glad you brought that up. If you jump over to 114, I actually changed that wording a little bit on 114 to recommendations or proposals from committees can be provided during committee reports or processed as outlined in GP 109, construction of the agenda. Which of those do you prefer? Which of those two versions do you prefer? And should we have it be consistent on both policies?
Yeah. I like the 114 language.
During committee reports or construction of the agenda. Okay.
Can I make a comment to that? Sometimes, however, we've come and the board has been asked for something and not received any information that they need to process a request prior to that time. You know, and sometimes I understand there may be an emergency, but when we come for a report, I mean, I think it's important that the other board members, if there's going to be some sort of request or action taken, that they have the opportunity besides the committee members. That's just my observation.
And if it is something where we need to take action or vote on something, it should be an agenda item.
Or at least give the board advanced preparation notice.
That's something that comes up regularly in executive committee. We say, should this be a committee report or should this be a separate agenda item? Okay, and then what about F? Do we list our current ones or do we get rid of F?
So, I'm thinking back on what happened, what transpired a year ago. And if something like F had been in place then, would that have been because if you think about it, to entirely remove one committee like we did with the Innovations Committee, was it two? What was the other one? The other one was Community Outreach. How would something like this have changed that dynamic? And I guess what I'm saying is if the next president comes in and says, I think those are really important, I mean, how does that, by codifying it in a policy, does that, would there have been more of a hesitancy to not remove those committees? Would there have been does that make sense what I'm asking?
Yep, we asked that same question in our committee meeting.
And, you know, and interestingly, what was in policy was, I think we still had a school community council committee, is what was in policy. That was changed several years ago, but we never changed
Innovations Committee,
policy, yeah.
No, wait, to the community one. Yeah.
And we used to, and what was in policy was a legislative/community relations advisory committee. And that was broken out into a government relations and community outreach. So we seem to change every couple of years, regardless of what was in our policy.
Okay.
Which
So
we
that's
have the
where I'm
right,
struggling with
Yeah.
what should
which
we have
we
in our
have the right to
policy.
do. Now, the question is always, should our policy reflect our practice, or should our practice reflect our policy?
We
Well-
make our policy flexible enough that changes can happen.
Well, it does say that committees are not limited to this list and may change as needs arise, which they do. So does that leave us enough leeway?
I mean, I just wonder, and really, Tracy, you're the only one in the position. Would that have impacted the direction you took with the committees if those had been written down? I guess that's the bottom line. Does that change that approach? And that's a great point as far as we've changed the names, but
Yeah, and
would it have changed how you approach that?
no, because all the committees had already changed considerably beforehand. So when I looked at the policy, I'm thinking, oh, we're already not doing all of this.
So is it a
So
moot
it's
point
the
to put it
question for,
in?
I guess.
Yeah. Is it
Yeah.
a moot point to put it in, or is it helpful to say to a new board, here are some of the committees we've had in the past?
Or do we not have it in policy, but we have a document that shows committee assignments and everyone, every, 2 years, we update that document as a board and decide what we want.
I think the committees are servant to the board, and that the policy should reflect that, rather than here are the committees each board has to have. However we word it, I would like the policy to say, hey, each board has the right to form the committees that will best serve that board, and here are some of the reasons we form committees.
And that's what I've been leaning towards is taking F out or just changing it to, each board has the opportunity or the right to create what committees will best serve them. And then a list of committees is a separate document. That's the way I'm leaning. Does anyone disagree with that or have a different suggestion?
We've typically had a flow chart of committees in the addendums. And maybe that's a great place to do that,
Yeah.
is to just say, the current board's flow chart of committees is as follows.
Okay. I think that's better, instead of having it in policy, to have it as an addendum. Okay, over to 114.
Well, so can I just bring something up real quick?
Yeah.
A1, I understand, I understand what that's saying in spirit, but we're all part of committees. We all know what happens between the board members and staff in those committees. I understand what that principle is, but if in their moments of candor, I would imagine that there's not a single district employee who doesn't serve on the committee who doesn't feel like they have been advised or given assignments from those committees. And so I don't know how a committee functions without doing that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it'd be hard to
It's-
function without.
Yeah, and so I'm not saying the practice should change. I think the way the committees and the staff work together is the way it needs to be. I don't know if that sentence accurately reflects that practice, though.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think the broader concept we agree with.
And so as long as we're changing and addressing it, I'd like to see an attempt to restate that to be more accurate to what's happening with our committees.
Because, yeah, it's trying to say the board's, I mean, the committee is to help the Board of Education on things that are clearly within the board's purview, and kind of what Marilyn mentioned up on the board, that are on our goal setting, being clear about. So that's what this is trying to say, is if this is not the board's decision, staff's decision, we shouldn't be advising them on that. But the way it's worded, I get what you mean. Mr. Van Komen, did you have something?
Instead of doing your job, this board likes to talk about meeting its ends or its goals. I mean, if you change it from you doing your job to helping the board meet or achieve, and then you don't need the last clause.
That may be, I'd be okay with that. I think I understand why that was included
Yeah.
at some point.
I really struggle with that one in my term. It was, I want to do what we need to do without becoming overly burdensome on staff time. I'd say, President, take a whack at that paragraph and bring it back to us.
Wait, one point. Speaking of staff time, is that in policy anywhere? I know we've talked about it a lot.
We put it in BSC.
have language along that lines in this policy also.
In the case of board members or committees requesting information or assistance without board authority, the superintendent shall obtain board approval when such requests, in the superintendent's opinion, require a material amount of staff time and funds to fulfill.
So do we need something along that lines?
That's the spirit. That's the spirit of, hey, let's do our job, but not be. If the superintendent feels like a committee's request is over some or is requiring too much time, then the superintendent will seek the whole board's approval. BSC 201, Part B.
Okay.
Which is why, our practice has become, I know this is going to take staff a lot of time, so I'm going to bring this to the board and get the board's approval before the assignment is made.
Okay, anything else on 113? Okay, 114. It's currently called Board Representation on District Committees or Other Organizations. Been struggling a lot with what exactly to say to define those other organizations. So I've got board members may represent the board on committees created by the district or on boards or committees created by other organizations. Organizations may include government agencies and community groups. Do you want to change this language
Match the other.
to match the other?
Yep.
Which part?
A, your
A.
request
A,
that
yeah.
the board president
Yeah.
make recommendations to the board for approval by the board.
We had a discussion. The language used to be that individual board members assigned to committees should report to the full board on a regular basis. And nobody knows what that means, regular basis. I mean, we have some committees that we never hear from because nothing ever comes up that the board member feels like they need to bring forward. So the change there was when items pertaining to the board or district arise. Does that work?
That's better.
And then D was problematic, that you shouldn't speak to issues that have not been officially decided by the board. Does that mean you can't speak in any of your committee meetings because you haven't gotten board approval and everything? So
Did you mean that to say should speak in harmony?
yes. And I don't know if harmony is the right word. I really struggled with this whole sentence. So if anyone's got a good way to word it, let me know.
So, and here's what I don't know if there's a distinction. All of these committees that we're referring, everything that would fall under this are committees that, is it the committees that we have been invited to send a representative to? Or is it any committee that a board member is on by virtue of their membership of our board?
Probably both. Because we do have things where we're invited to sit on, but then we also have things that are in, probably in statute, like if there's a redevelopment agency taxing entity meeting.
I would lump that into we're invited, or because I can think of two right now that fall under the, by virtue of your seat, by virtue of your membership of this board, you are part of. I mean, yes, we no longer have the right to a seat at UHSAA, but my understanding is Marilyn could not serve on that, in that position without virtue of her membership on this board. Is that accurate?
As a board member, if I were still an administrator, there's the
Right, but the only reason you have the right to serve on that board is by virtue of your membership on this.
That's correct.
Same with Utah School Boards Association.
Okay, so that one fits under that, because technically our district isn't invited, our region, or
Our district is a region.
Yeah.
And every region gets a board member
No.
on Utah School Boards Association.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
and then, Tracy, you had the opportunity to serve on that Point of the Mountain Commission, which, again, I don't know if you were asked to serve on that by virtue of your membership on this board or as a private citizen.
That was by virtue of being a member of this board.
And so, is there a different accountability for one than the other, or is it do we see it as the same accountability? Is that,
Yeah, because we're representing the board. That's why we've been asked to join. Because they want someone from the board. What do you think?
I think it ought to be the same accountability. Even though, I mean,
It may continue after the assignment on the board ends. They may keep Tracy on that board when she's no longer a board member.
I think that's
Oh.
done, right?
Yeah, I think all of these, if you're not a board member, you no longer are on those other boards.
However, what about JEF?
I was gonna say, the only exception is maybe foundation. You can join something as a private citizen.
Right.
And I would say it's definitely the same responsibility and stewardship,
And same accountability.
same accountability.
I would think so too.
Because my only question is, well, Tracy wouldn't be accountable to this board if she's no longer a member of this board, but still serves on one of those other boards. But if that's no longer a possibility, then absolutely yes. I see them as the same accountability and responsibility.
And do we even need to make that distinction within this? Or do we just say all? I think somewhere we need to specify that this applies to all committees a board member can be or will be a part of by virtue of their membership of this board.
I like that. Any assignment that comes by virtue of your board assignment or your board membership binds you to act like a board member and report to the board.
Okay. Okay, and again, there's a list. I mean, these ones have not changed through, at least while I've been on the board. They've stayed the same, although GIAC is added. That's been a new recent committee.
So I thought we needed to alter UHSAA. Because we definitely don't have an alternate.
Right, you're right. And even,
It's an elected position.
and we only have a member if elected.
Correct.
So but I do like that it's on there to keep us aware that that is something that, So I think that ought to be one member parentheses and then some type of simple note.
Okay, anything else? Thank you.
So the JEAC, when you say one liaison, two members, a total of three, is that what we're saying, or are we saying?
Yes, a total of 3.
Okay.
Else? Thank you. All right, we will move on to our Licensed Employee Advisory Committee and start out, this is a good segue coming from our committee policies. We've talked a lot about LEAC as a board and also with an executive committee, and particularly in studying this committee policy and trying to figure out where it fits. And there's been a lot of concern with the current method of rotating board members. We all want to go to LEAC. I think it's crucial that all board members get to go to LEAC. It is a phenomenal opportunity to get feedback directly from our teachers. But I worry that we're missing some effectiveness by doing that. And so, as executive committee has discussed and would like to bring this proposal to the board, that we appoint one person to be the chair of that committee that can really take ownership, make sure that we are being consistent and being effective with that, see issues through from meeting to meeting, and then we would continue to rotate the other board members through that. And we would like to have Matt be that chairperson. And I have talked to him about that. He is willing and excited to have that role. Mr. Young was instrumental in the person behind creating LEAC in the first place, and would love to use his final time here on the board to really make sure that committee is operating effectively for the board. So any board members have any questions about that? Okay. Congratulations.
Well, questions and assent are two different things. Is that,
Nobody said anything.
is everyone agreeable to that?
That's true. Under the current policy, the president can just appoint. Under our new policy, I bring a recommendation to the board, and the board will vote on it.
I very much favor that.
So-
I think there's great wisdom in having a leader, a head, an organizer, a vision, a connection. And for me, that's right now, it's an obvious. I think Matt is the right person at the right time. I very much support that. Do I vote yes?
All right. Is there anyone opposed? Just so you know, we will take Mr. Young off of chairing government relations.
You.
For now, the legislative session is just starting, so for now, Ms. Richards and I will get through the legislative session, and then we will
Get through it.
yes, along with Mr. Anderson's help, and then decide where we want to go with the committee and whether or not adding a third person is the right thing to do there.
So given that,
Okay.
we have scheduled for, when is our next LEAC?
January
meeting?
26th.
26th. Okay, that's that, okay.
Now, it has not formally, I don't believe the building has been scheduled. Has it or has it not? I think we put it on our calendars, but I don't think the building has been scheduled. Is that correct?
This building?
Yes.
I don't know that.
I will work with Dr. Godfrey and get moving on it.
I believe it is.
Okay.
I believe it is.
Okay.
But I hesitate to say that definitively without double checking.
If it is, it's because you and your staff picked up and did it. It's not because we actually took formal action and asked you to reserve it. So I would propose that we, formally ask that it be reserved for the 26th.
And have teachers been notified?
Yes.
I seem to
they had
remember a save the date went out at one
A
point in
save
time.
the date went out,
Okay,
not topics or,
yeah.
I'll make a note to send a reminder. And to be sure that we've reserved the room.
And who will be the other two attendees?
I was scheduled to be one of
Yeah.
them, and I cannot. My new teaching schedule, I'll be teaching night classes on Wednesday and Thursday. So I will not be available.
And it was Mr. Dunford and Mr. Robinson.
Having a chair now, are we still going to carry over the same member from a previous meeting? So, like in the instance of Mr. Robinson?
I think the chair will now be the one that carries over. But for this particular meeting, I guess the question
I
is, do
don't
we
think
need
it
to?
applies there, it just triggered a question.
Yeah.
Tracy, I think you were next up.
I was gonna say, I'm trying to pull up the rotation list right now.
I can come if you want me to.
Yeah, you're still on the list, Daryl.
I am available, most likely.
I believe you were the next one on the list, Tracy.
So should we plan on that, the three of us?
Yeah.
And remind me what time that's at.
4 to 6.
Wednesday, January 26th?
We're going to have all together on this one, correct?
Correct.
Do you want to have a discussion now about that topic for that night?
This is really, yes, the time to do that would be now as opposed to the 25th.
Good point.
So yeah, if we want some, if people want to provide input, of which I welcome, yeah, this would be the time to discuss that. I have some thoughts, if you all like me to share that, or if you all want to provide your thoughts, and then I can incorporate those into what I have in mind. However we want to approach that.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anyone else want to chime in first?
I'd like to hear his thoughts.
And I've lost Mr. Robinson, so I can't see him anymore. I'm trying to get back online, but assuming he can hear us still.
I can hear you.
Okay, good. Okay, all right, go ahead.
So my thoughts center around what what I see as our big priority in the next 6 months with regards to not.
Sorry.
That's okay. And we've had this discussion with LEAC, but given that we are narrowing in on a moment where we do have an opportunity to make significant structural changes to our funding, I would love to hear from these teachers to communicate the position that this board is in the next, 4 to 6 months, that we do have some opportunities to appropriately resource those vital needs for the district, and to hear from those representatives of all the things that we have been talking about, hearing about, and any other items. So does a school counselor move their needle? Does reducing class size, I know that's always, but what of all the priorities that we have coming at us is the one that we now have an opportunity to where could they use the most help to? I've been using a pie analogy quite often, in that it seems to be that the teachers serve if you look at education as a pie, our teachers have a large slice of that responsibility. But there are lots of other responsibilities within that education pie, and we seem to be expanding the teacher slice with those responsibilities. And so what are those things that our teachers feel would best shrink the size of their slice? Would best shrink the size. Yeah. What efforts could we make that would best shrink that slice of that pie so that they really can focus on their craft? And we've had that question before, but we have the opportunity to really move that needle. And I'd love to revisit that, and I would acknowledge that we've had this discussion, but now we're in a position to really start, not that we're making any commitments, not that we're making any promises, but we just need to, again, build our story, build our why, and we need to start with them. That would be what my approach to this next meeting.
Totally aligns and would be a great start for what I wanted to put on the board. That's precisely what I want to hear.
Okay.
I would just say, based on feedback from our last LEAC meeting, that be cautious that not everybody in that room is a teacher, and that they are looking for a little bit of individual acknowledgement there.
And that's why the idea of the whole education pie is everyone has their piece of that, and it could that's great counsel, because it should be able to generate, well, we as counselors do X or Y, and we if we had this, we could even do this. And so I think but that is good counsel. Thank you.
That has my blessing. I think given this discussion and what we're going to start to talk about, that might be a great way to start kicking off some of these resolutions.
Anything else?
We did talk at one point about helping them as a body understand what is the board responsible for, what is the superintendent responsible for, what are legislators responsible for. That may have gone by the wayside, but at one point that was a discussion item.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind, yeah.
Because they were very much interested at the last meeting and very confused as to, well, what does the board do, and what do we need legislators to do, and what is it that the superintendent can do? So just, not that I'm asking for that, I'm just making you aware of it. That at one point, that was one of our discussion points.
Okay.
And I would say that is probably heightened right now as this new health order is rolling out and teachers are saying, Why are we doing these exemptions so loosely? I think it might be nice even just to specify in terms of that situation, how things work.
And there could be opportunities for that even just throughout the discussion.
Yeah.
Clarify that. Okay, good.
Okay, then I will send a communication to Tracy and Daryl, and we'll start kind of talking about how to roll that meeting out, and I'll work with Dr. Godfrey to get a communication out to our representatives.
Great. I know they really appreciate having that time heads up notice before coming to LEAC to talk to others about things and bring us information.
I'm going to ask a Jen question because I know she would ask it at this point. Are you comfortable taking over the email responsibility from here on out?
Absolutely. And I'll be in communication with her to get the password and whatnot.
And I did run that by her, and she was supportive of it. She's very organized and done a good job with that, but I think it would make more sense to have Mr. Young do it.
I think that needs to be a better used resource. Having monitored that, very little is being exchanged. And I think that should be, with it being in your hands, it will be much more of a communication tool now and less of a assignment. I check it off the box.
Yeah. I think there's wisdom in consistency, and so I think that I'm excited to see how this rolls out.
I apologize, I had to step out. What are the topics?
I'll
get them from you.
Yeah.
I'll get them
In a
from you.
nutshell.
Yeah.
I'll get them from you.
Yeah.
So we can get, like you were talking about, an email out to everyone.
Okay, thank you. And very much looking forward to continuing to work with LEAC. Let's take a break. Just in case the next item's long. It probably won't be. It'll be quick, but just in case, let's take a break. 15 minutes enough? Okay, we'll take a 15-minute break. Meet back at 6:20. Right about the classes in the N95. It does do a better job of classes.
Yeah, there's no error.
Yeah, exactly right.
Which is why they endorsed it. But I'll tell you, singing through one of these is not very easy.